Hi everyone, I'm Chipped Tunes, and today I'll be talking about how to write a snowy theme. So, how do you write winter music? Something that makes you see flurries of snow out the window, something that might be cold and desolate or light and jolly? Given the proliferation of Christmas music across a lot of Western culture, the answer to this question is something that you probably already know, even if you can't vocalize it. You've likely heard so much of this music, ranging from Mariah Carey to Tchaikovsky. Given that there's so much of this kind of music, how can we narrow it down into a few key tips that will help you get started writing your first theme for a snowy mountaintop? For the sake of this video, we'll focus mostly on video game music, since that's what I was trying to write with my song called Snow and Sunshine, which you can check out above. There also happens to be an almost overwhelming amount of examples in this genre, but luckily for you, I'm here to break it down. If you find any of these tips useful, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's get into it. So, across all of the thousands of snowy themes that exist, what's the one thing the vast majority have in common? That's right, you guessed it, sleigh bells.
Funny thing, I keep hearing bells all day.
Well, naturally, everybody does this time of the
There's
year.
always a topic in each of these videos that I could easily spend another full video talking about. In this one, it's the inextricable linkage between the winter season in the Northern Hemisphere and Christmas. For now, I'd guess that most people are familiar with, and perhaps by this point in the year, a little annoyed by the ubiquitous sound of jingle bells. But that's precisely what makes them so useful in your compositional toolkit. What other instruments are useful to immediately evoke snow and winter weather? Bells, glockenspiels, chimes, and other tinkly percussion are definitely helpful. Even piano in its higher register will make people think of swirling snowflakes if you use it right. Of course, most likely you'll want to use a wider variety of instruments in your composition. Or perhaps, like early video game composers, you don't have access to real instruments at all. So what can you do then? For my particular piece, I also had originally planned on using bassoon in its higher register, and you can get a lot of mileage out of many instruments if you focus on the quote-unquote cooler side of the sound palette, which you'll often find in the higher registers. This is a large part of why all the instruments I listed before are high-pitched. So even if you're working in the absence of recognizable instruments, this is a useful technique to remember. Of course, there's much more to writing music than choosing what instruments to write for. So let's take a look at another key facet of composition, harmony. In general, if you're writing music for a snowy level in a game, or perhaps composing a tone poem for a wintry setting, you have one of two choices. You can write something warm and cozy, or you can write something cold and desolate. Your choices of chord progressions will make or break the atmosphere you're trying to build, so it's important to consider this step of the process and make sure you're sculpting the sound you want. When I wrote Snow and Sunshine, I didn't have a super strong grasp of functional harmony, despite having a music degree.
Years of academy training wasted!
So I did the best thing I can recommend to any starting composer. I stole from my betters. In this case, the wealth of existing material will really serve you well. For video game examples of a cold and desolate setting, you can't do much better than Mount Coronet from Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. For something warm and cozy, I looked to the Christmas side of things. Vince Guaraldi's Skating was the biggest inspiration for me, which I'm sure you can hear in the full video. This also highlights some other interesting aspects of composing in a particular style. You can take the onomatopoeia approach, where you try to get as close as possible to literally quoting the environment you're trying to evoke. This is where Mount Coronet's sparse orchestration and sandpaper-like effects make you almost feel the cold wind blowing across the mountaintop. Or you can try to borrow from the established cultural language surrounding the genre you're targeting. In brief, there are certain ideas that have become associated with the winter season over time just due to the popularity of the songs they were used in. So why not use that yourself? But I digress. Getting back to video game music, we often have a very practical need to accompany a snowy landscape, and so video game composers have co-opted a lot of the Christmas musical alphabet to suit their needs. But I find that video game music is even better at evoking the feelings of walking through a winter wonderland than, well,
Walking in a winter wonderland.
need I say more? And that's because they don't have the luxury of slapping some lyrics about presents and caroling to bring their audience into the fold. They have to create a living world for you to step into where it's winter eternally, or at least for the length of the level or the player's time in that town. So you find composers falling back a lot on similar techniques. The sparse instrumentation I mentioned before, wide intervals between instruments, for example, a prominent bass and upper voice but no middle, often in a waltz-like time signature of 3/4 or 6/8. Listen to the Snowman theme from Earthbound and you can see it has all of the qualities I just described. And it's not the only one. Melodies will vary, but they often follow similar patterns of rising and falling in almost a circular fashion, never straying too far in one direction or another. Take a look at Freeze Easy Peak from Banjo-Kazooie. Perhaps this is reading too far into it on my part, but I can definitely see how structuring your melody in this way could make the listener think of eddies of snow floating through the air. Now, I talked earlier about warm and cool palettes and the choices you have when determining what kind of winter music you want to write. These palettes help you lean into one or the other, but I find that I like it best when composers combine the two, as I think is done in Pokemon themes like Snowbell or Chichester City. I leaned into this quite a lot in my piece, even in the title. I've just thrown a lot of information at you. Given all of that, let's take a look at how I actually put some of it together in writing Snow and Sunshine. I'll briefly go through some of my original drafts of this piece. This first one, which I started in 2022, shows off some of the elements I've talked about already. The instrumentation includes glockenspiel, piano, and bassoon. The time signature is compound, starting in 12/8 and going to a rather unorthodox 8/8, which I used for a circular sounding melody. And the melody itself consists of rising and falling lines without ever landing anywhere. My second attempt was a bit of a mess, to be frank, but this is when I first started borrowing from the Christmas musical vocabulary, which I would end up doing to great effect in my last draft. This was a much more sedate version of the final tune, but eventually I got the idea to incorporate varying tempos in the song, and so the main theme of the second draft ultimately became the introduction of the final version. And my decision to use the warmer tones of the lower clarinet also stayed through to the final draft. The third draft finally synthesized many of the ideas I've talked about up to this point, as well as something I was intentionally studying during the composition process: melodic structure. I owe a lot to Ryan Leach's videos on the subject, which I'll link in the description below. But giving yourself a structure can help a lot no matter what your level of musical expertise is, and for this song I used both the period and the sentence forms. The last step was to put it all in my tracker, which for this project was FamiTracker. Given the length of this video already, I'll omit other details that arose during this process, but if you're curious, feel free to ask in the comments below, or check out my livestream from last year where I went over this in a lot more detail. And there you have it! That's how I went about writing a winter-inspired chiptune for my original January song in 2023. I hope you enjoyed Snow and Sunshine, which you should absolutely check out if you haven't already. And thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video and want to keep learning how to write video game music in various styles, and leave a comment below if you like this or have any feedback on the video. I'll be doing one of these videos for all of the songs I wrote in 2023, so as always, stay tuned!